Welcome back to the Women in Movement podcast. We are here with Marianne Dabir, who is an instructor and performer in New York City. Marianne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me, T. This is actually my first time doing a podcast ever.
Woo.
Yeah, babies first. So I'm been a pole dancer for about 8 years. Been teaching it for 3, and pole is my main thing, but I'm broadening my horizons into more like generalized movement. Super excited to get into that with you.
Yes. And so you did dance as a kid as well, right?
Yeah, as a little kid, I did like the classic like ballet, jazz, tap combo from about like 3 years old to off and on up until like 7th grade. Anyone who ever did like youth dance or like, dance in high school, like knows about the toxic dance environment, like with the dance moms and the everything. So I quit in 7th grade, and I totally thought that I was like, oh, it's over for me. I'll never dance again. I thought about joining the dance group in college, or like there were several in college I could have joined, and I was like, no, I it's too late for me. I'll never dance again. And then at like 26 years old, found pole dancing, and turns out it wasn't too late.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that intro, because it brings me back to like I also danced through Irish dance, and then at one moment my sister was named like very talented in the class, and I was sitting there like the older sister by a year, like very turned off, and I was like, I'm just gonna stick to basketball. Like my younger sister can't be better at me than me at something. And then and then again found it dancing later in life. It's funny.
Gosh, yeah. Common experience for sure. But man.
So then you also had tried team sports a little bit, but
yeah. When my mom encouraged me to quit dance in 7th grade, because it was like everyone was just mean. Everyone else in my hometown, I'm from Michigan, where ice hockey reigns supreme. I joke that like by law you have to like play ice hockey at some point during your childhood, and that's what all my friends played, and like all my the families that my family was friends with like all had athletic kids. I did field hockey, lacrosse, ice hockey. I was terrible at all of them. I did some like soccer as a kid too, and I was the girl, like making daisy chains like on the field like during the game, completely unaware of what was happening. So it wasn't a great fit for me. It didn't really raise my self-esteem. I was kind of always being like yelled at. But I really liked skating. I loved figure skating, and putting on hockey skates wasn't nearly as fun, but I did like flying on the ice. It was just, game theory and like motivation to be part of a team and, care about like whether the team won or lost, that I was really not good at. Did not resonate.
Oh my gosh, it's funny. It's interesting that you say that you got into figure skating, because I can see that in your dance.
Yeah.
Now that you like say that, I'm like, I see those like images in your dance. So if you're listening, make sure you check out some of her videos and see if you can catch any figure skating.
Yeah, it's a huge, that was another thing too, where I was like, I never did the, going to the rink at like 5:30 a.m. to practice. And, I would have loved that, but that just wasn't, my parents weren't into that. I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of pole dancers, probably a lot of like dancers, watch figure skating and just go, oh, yes, like I want to be that. And so like being spin pole, it really makes me feel like I get to like live my figure skating fantasies a lot.
Yes, and you are so graceful on spin pole too.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Yeah, so then at some point you moved to New York City. And what drove you here?
So I wanted a career in fashion. I wanted to go to college in New York City, but my family thought it would be too dangerous. So I moved here with a degree in journalism and art history. I double majored and was just dead set on like doing the Devil Wears Prada thing, like working at a fashion magazine, getting to be an editor. And my first job was at Teen Vogue, and it was a very different landscape in 2011, 2012, which is when I graduated and moved here. Extremely toxic. those like big publishing companies couldn't figure out how to monetize digital, and all of a sudden like they weren't gatekeeping the fashion industry anymore because of like the internet and blogs.
Yes.
So it was a tumultuous time, and it didn't take me very long to realize that like I didn't want to be there. That like nothing about it, like no one was concerned about pushing the art form forward. Everyone was just like very concerned about like their title and like their job and getting invited to all the parties. That was literally it. None of the editors that I worked with seemed very happy in their lives. And yeah, it's and that was something that like my family really like pushed me towards. My mom and my grandma especially, like they really wanted me to have this like glamorous New York City life. And yeah, so when I left the industry, it was a huge identity crisis for me because I didn't know what I wanted to be at all, or like what I wanted to do with my time. So yeah, that started that was all part of a really difficult quarter life crisis. There were many things very wrong with my life at that time, but that was a big one.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Well, I'm sure you learned so much from that experience.
So much.
So,
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I can't be mad at it now.
Yeah, and you take your fashion to your pieces now, and yeah, definitely bring it character.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah,
costuming is fun.
yeah. I see a lot of like stick it stuff too, which is like it definitely has a theme, and you're always in theme.
Thanks. Yeah. I appreciate you noticing.
So then at some point you got into competitive bodybuilding, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was that quarter life crisis, 24, 25 years old. I had like been laid off from like the magazine biz because like I said, terrible time for the industry at that point. I had a few other jobs like working in fashion and was just completely miserable. Had a really terrible relationship with a toxic waste dump of a human being. Which again taught me a lot. I can't be mad, but at the time it was like very traumatic. I was like very isolated from my friends, like had grown apart from my college friends that I moved here with. So it was like a period of like deep loneliness and just like aimlessness too, like literally not knowing what I wanted to do with myself or my time. Like competitive bodybuilding was the thing that I like found myself getting into. And it made sense in hindsight. One, it was like very trendy on Instagram at the time, and like Instagram was like really picking up, especially in like the fitness space at that point. And the horrible person that I had a really traumatic breakup with had been a bodybuilder from Long Island and was training other bodybuilders. He wasn't very disciplined or very like good at it himself, so I kind of like took it as a challenge to be like, oh yeah, like F you, like I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna do it better than you.
Yeah, the competitiveness came out.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, totally. So I got into it for completely the wrong reasons. My self-esteem was like in the trash too at that point, and I would definitely not, it's not a healthy hobby to get into if you're not like feeling really good about yourself. You don't have a lot of self-confidence because like you're constantly scrutinizing your physical body, and then also, you know, holding yourself to like an insane level of discipline. So, you know, it was like really bad in a lot of ways, but also it was extremely grounding. It was a beautiful exercise and, you know, motivation and like goal setting. Yeah, it was a lot of bad and a lot of good things all in one. And it, you know, it's really changed me. Like it built me up physically. I'd never been strong in my life. I'd always been like athletic at individual sports and like dance, skiing, horseback riding. So this was like another individual sport. That was a completely new experience, but yeah.
Yeah. I can see now, just having this reflection on what you've discussed, it's competitive bodybuilding has a lot of, I've had a very negative viewpoint on it for a very long time, but I also now can flip the switch and be like, there are a lot of positives to it as well. I can see the negatives of the like dance mom life, right? Where you're an adult doing the dance mom life and you're your own dance mom, right? Like you're your own critique, you're your own, like, just every line must pop, every, you know, every little muscle must be shown. But at the same point, one, you're pushing yourself to your limits, and how do you know where your limits are unless you push yourself there? Or do your limits get smaller if you don't push yourself, right? So I could see that as being a positive. Another positive could be even just body awareness of like, there are these muscles that you didn't even know existed, which you also find in movements too, but in competitive bodybuilding, you're really like focused on making each muscle pop, right? Like,
exactly.
So it's like, it's very into, even though it can be a non-intuitive sport as far as like eating and, you know, trying to give your body what it needs, it can also be like intuitive in the fact of there are certain muscles that you're really focused on, or exercises that you're really like just dedicating a lot of time to. And I also like, I have a hard time being very like, I have a hard time being negative about movement in general, because I'm like, as long as you're doing something, it's better than nothing, you know?
Yeah. It was, I like bodybuilding, like aside from the disordered eating aspect of it, which like not every bodybuilder is like that. And there are many pro bodybuilders that have, like very healthy, balanced lives. But at the time where I started it from literally nothing, I had no knowledge, no, like you said, body awareness. I did it completely ass backwards. I did not need to like eat every single one of my meals out of Tupperware for like 2.5 years. There were other ways.
And now they're finding that like certain Tupperwares will give you cancer. So it's like,
yeah. I am full of microplastics and BPAs from that period of time. But yeah, like getting to know the body was beautiful. And that was like really the first place that I felt at home. Like everything in my life, dance had always felt like very natural and very good. But I was not encouraged to pursue it. But like with bodybuilding, like that was kind of my first way of like really getting back into my physical self. And it felt, like I said, like very grounding and very natural. And like I didn't have to work so hard against the grain. It felt like I could find more flow, and like was tapping into my intuition more. And I had really great people around me too. The gym where I spent so much of my time was this place called Steel Gym in Chelsea, and like old heads will know it. But it was on 23rd between 6th and 7th. Now it's a Rumble boxing gym, which is just crazy to me, because it used to be this grungy, like we used to call it, like a prison style gym, where it was all like bright primary blue and like fire engine red inside, like really ugly colors. And the only people who worked out there were like old gay dudes who lived in the neighborhood and going there for like 40 years. And then hardcore bodybuilders, like big dudes who were decades into bodybuilding. Like there were definitely steroids being sold just openly on the floor. The bathrooms were disgusting. The equipment was extremely old. But as a 20-something young woman, going there was so freeing, because I think probably all of us have had this experience of, walking into a crunch, or if you're fancy an Equinox, and then like being stared at, or like being mansplained to, or just like plain like being disrespected. And there at Steel, like everyone was just there to do work, and like the mutual respect was amazing. And I never got mansplained to. I, never had someone come and correct my form. But what would happen is like these, some big dude who's like 40 years into the lifting game, like literally, would just be hanging out there, and I'd walk in and be like, "What are you doing today? You hitting legs? All right, let's hit legs together." And they would, would like take me through, like spot me, like would hang out and taught me so much. My knowledge base just grew exponentially, like in the 2.5 years that I was going there.
It's like little school.
Yeah, totally. All these like weird little like hacks for like weightlifting, or like modifications for like classic exercises. Like, get the hamstrings a little bit better to like get this weird angle on the leg press, or is all that knowledge, which I couldn't have like paid a trainer to give me that. It just came from a whole bunch of like a whole community of these gym rats. So,
yeah.
It's very special, and I'm very deeply grateful to them.
Yeah. It's so nice to have an environment where you feel comfortable in, and like you feel, again, there's a mutual respect of like, oh, you're hitting legs, like we're gonna do it together, as opposed to like, you should do this, have you ever tried this? And like maybe after a few reps or something being like, oh, I tried this at this angle, it gave me this result. That's a different conversation than someone just walking up to you in the gym and making you take out your headphones to tell you something about your body. And I think that like we had discussed this in like 2 episodes ago, but yeah, I think just everyone can give a little bit of knowledge to each other, but I think you should be at the same ground level first. Even with a conversation, you don't just start off by telling people about themselves, right? Like no one gets more upset than when they're doing something in the street and someone shouts out the window, hey, don't cross here. Like, like everyone should start at a base ground level, and then you have a conversation from there. Not just the like, this is what you should be doing, or yes. And it can be a conversation about it. I'm sure you shared a lot of information as well of what you've learned in those moments too. So it's a beautiful exchange of knowledge as opposed to.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you can do it in community versus as a way to assert dominance.
Yes, and at that time in your life too, I think like what would have been powerful for me, I don't know about you, but just feeling strong is like, there's been times in my life where I just wanted to feel strong, and lifting more weights makes you feel strong in a different way than calisthenics does.
Absolutely.
Like I can move this rock.
Literally. Yeah. Like seeing the numbers go up on your deadlift is, like a lot of times that's like the only thing that like was giving me anything at that point in my life. Yeah. It's cool. Yeah. It was the first time in my life that I'd ever been like strong. That's, pole also makes me strong, or keeps me strong. And that's truly one of the things that I like the most about myself, is that I can, I could pull myself up off the ledge of a building. Yeah. if I really needed to. I can throw my like suitcase into the overhead bin at the airport. I know that I know how to fall. Mm-hmm. It's all these things I'm so grateful for. I'm so grateful that I've strengthened my body.
Yeah, I think too, even you sent me some photos of you back in your body, in your competitive like days of bodybuilding, and it's like, wow, like even your body changed. Your body looked different, like it was like a different mass, like, and pole and other dance or movement practices will change your body if that becomes more in the forefront. It's changed my body for sure. Yeah. 'Cause like, there's things where you're like, I don't want to eat too much because I have to pull myself up later. Like, It's not like I don't want to eat too much because I'm going to go to the gym. Like I could still do some presses with some food in my stomach, but like I can't I can't do all these like pull things with extra food.
Exactly. Yeah, you can be very like strategic about like nutrition density, or like denser foods. Yes. Yeah, that's my struggle. Constantly.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this inside leg hang is gonna not be fun if I had pizza before. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it kind of makes you eat. It gives you a different type of diet of like, I don't want to feel like this.
Yeah, for sure.
So okay, so you eventually moved on to teaching. Can you tell us some fun things about teaching pole, or even if you want to talk about the beginning journeys of pole?
Yeah, absolutely. I did a teaching certification, elevated 1 at Body and Pole in January 2020. What a time that was. If we only knew. But that was purely just to deepen my own knowledge and maybe teach some privates. But honestly, I just wanted to be a better, more informed dancer and maybe be able to teach some friends. Never thought I'd be teaching. you know, at the time I was still trying to make my like career work. At that time I was working as a branding graphic designer, doing a lot of copywriting to hating every minute of it. Literally never found any gratification in my work, but I just was convinced that like, you know, sunk cost fallacy, where I was like, oh, I spent so much time like, you know, getting education and like, you know, like trying to build this career, so I have to stick with it. So I did my first teaching certification in January 2020. Then this little thing happened in March 2020. And I spent a lot of time with my home pole, like a lot of us did. I was extremely lucky to have a pole in my living room in my old apartment in Brooklyn. Did have to like move every piece of furniture out of the way in order to get a pole session in, but and actually, like, during that time, like, I have Instagram posts where, like, I'm in the living room and, like, my husband is, like, sitting shirtless at his desk or, like, in the kitchen, like, making something, and our apartment's a huge mess. I just did not care. I had a very different perspective on Instagram at that point, or, like, what I was putting there. But, yeah, I spent a lot of time on my home pole, like actually learning how to dance. At that point, I'd been taking classes for about 4 years, and I completely replaced my weightlifting, like my gym life, just with pole dancing. That was the only thing I was doing. So I had a lot of skills, and I knew that I liked low flows. I knew that I loved spin pole, aerial shapes, flowy, pretty, wearing heels technique, but I didn't know like who I was as a dancer. And so that you know, little pandemic thing, like really for me was the silver lining was giving me time and space to really figure that out. I did a lot of training with Carmine Black, who, if you don't know her, definitely go find her on Instagram and like get lost in some of her videos. She's a phenomenal, like otherworldly mover and an incredible teacher who like really pushes in an interesting way, and just has a really incredible like perspective on movement in general, like, you know, aside from pole. So I was very lucky where I got to do a lot with her online. Then in 2021, when studios started opening back up, Incredible opened this beautiful space in Gowanus, which is, you know, we both go there.
Yes.
And I had trained at Incredible at their old Greenpoint location pre-pandemic. I actually have a video from like March 10th, 2020.
Oh my gosh.
Where I was at like the last open pole there. No idea what was about to happen. Everyone was like, oh, we should probably like sanitize our hands, I guess. I was like, oh, thank goodness we have spray bottles of alcohol.
Yeah.
So when that studio reopened, I got there as fast as I could just to like get some studio time in that beautiful new space. And I just thought to ask Sharon and Kirsten, like, are you hiring instructors? And they were like, yeah. And, like, we actually really need, like, our most requested class is Spin Pole 101. Is that something you'd be interested in? And I was like, absolutely, yes. I'm so very grateful to them because I really had no teaching experience. I'd had a certification. I had like, you know, kind of taught some friends some things during the pandemic on my home pole, but, you know, I don't think like very few other studios would have been like, sure, here's a mock class, but right place at the right time, and also like with the right people. You know, they're very they're just such kind, wonderful, like,
yes,
and great community builders. So yeah, so I did a mock class. Like the warm-up that I gave in that mock class was like, you know, I was like very nervous. I don't maybe do this. I don't know. Like my music just stopped. Okay, sorry. Hang on. Let me fix the playlist. But once like the actual pole portion of the class like got started, I like really found a flow, and it was beautiful. And it was just like the class felt like it was just like teaching itself. It was a full room in the loft. So 9 poles, 18 students, including Kirsten, who was auditing me. And I really like was surprised prepping that class, that I realized that I like had a very strong perspective on like how an intro to spin pole class should be taught, or like what I would have wanted in an intro to spin pole class, like, you know, 6 years prior. And yeah, so it just felt so natural and so fun. It was the first time I'd ever like really had fun at work. So
nice.
And then I was like absolutely hooked. Yeah, I just knew that I wanted to do that as my full-time.
Yeah.
2 years later, I'm still doing it.
That's so exciting. And yes, Sharon and Kirsten are both wonderful people. And it's really cool that, one, you had the courage to go up there and, ask after not having teaching experience. And then two, that you just felt that you were in this space that you could grow and you could pursue your passions. That's so exciting. And you always come in with a smile on your face, so we always know you're having fun. We know you enjoy it.
Totally. I'm extremely lucky.
Yeah. So then from there also, you've also done like performances and you go to Burning Man, right? So like what drives you to do all of these like other things that bring in different community spaces?
Yeah, I've been to Burning Man 4 times. In 2022, I actually helped co-found a camp with some friends, and since it was my camp or our camp, I got to bring a stage pole, which is something I'd always wanted to do. From the first time I went to the burn, I was like, we need more poles. And you find a lot of poles at Burning Man, but they're like all crusty and like, don't work very well. They've been playa-fied, so, they've just been in the desert. Like, yeah, the desert like ruins everything very quickly. But yeah, I got to bring a really nice like X-pole stage. I invested in a silicone pole, which was so cool because silicone makes it like incredibly accessible to everyone. And I just started teaching, or, I was like, a year into teaching in 2022. So I got to teach a lot of fellow burners.
Nice.
Which was so amazing. It was such a nice like melding of things. We haven't been back since. My husband and I haven't been back since, just because of life, but we're considering going back for this year because it's hard. It's very much like type 2 fun. You use a lot of resources. Like it is not like an environmentally conscious experience. A lot of fossil fuels and just a lot of like waste with like getting supplies out there and stuff. I struggle with like the amount of resources it takes to get there because I think it should absolutely be a more accessible event. And there are things in place to like make it accessible and available to a lot of people. But like especially after or post pandemic, it feels to me, just in my 1 year of being back there, like post 2020, it felt like a lot of artists got pushed out because, artists got hit among the hardest with the pandemic. So that's my kind of current like struggle with Burning Man. I would love to go back in 2025 and like see how the culture has kind of like bounced back, because it is really beautiful. It's so many parallels with like the Burning Man community and pole dancing, or like just like the movement communities in general. You're all like kind of finding the limits of like really healthy hedonism among community that like really deeply cares for each other. And so, it's a beautiful like place of exploration and safety. And that creates a lot of beauty and just a lot of experiences where you kind of have to like pinch yourself and be like, oh my God, am I in the 4th dimension? Like,
right.
This is like, how is this happening? This is incredible. But yeah, going to Burning Man has taught me a lot about just like what life can be, what community can be, what experiences like are available to or possible to us students. So right. and being in community with movers, absolutely with the pole community, but also like more like freestyle based movers, even like gym people, you find a lot of like common threads in all of that. So
if you're like open to making the connections, they're there.
Absolutely.
It's to put everything in its own space and try to categorize it that you don't find the connections, but they're all there. Everybody has the same type. We are all wired the same as well. Exactly. So it's like same things attract us, and yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I think so that kind of reminds me too of like I used to go to these retreats in Seattle through Evolve Move Play, and there's like stuff that people would do in these retreats, and a lot of the activities were parkour based in nature, and stuff that people would be able to do on these retreats that they probably wouldn't have done on their own training. It shows the power of community and spirit, and like training with people that believe in you and help you to give you that positive thought and reinforcement before doing hard things, or just allowing you to like also free up that brain space of like negativity that like allows you to be creative or find a new choice.
Yes.
So like taking that negative like brain activity away, it just, I feel, allows you to like really wire all these different ways in which you can achieve the thing.
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah, just space to, you know, make mistakes or have accidents and like not judge them. And, you know, like, see where those mistakes or those accidents like just could take you.
Yeah.
I mean, to even like bring it back to pole too, like my first few years of pole were very much like, you know, oh, I have to be perfect. Like where I really didn't want to make mistakes in front of like my classmates, or like you didn't want to like look bad
in the back of their camera.
Totally.
Some people are doing that.
Yes, totally. And like, you know, being in other spaces was really helpful. Like working in like the club space too, honestly, like, you know, like really gave me permission taught me a lot about being in front of an audience, and gave me permission to like just be not perfect in front of an audience. Because in a club, like no one's really paying attention to your technique.
Right.
And so, you know, and it's like a very like passive kind of attention often. So yeah, like the being in spaces like Burning Man, being in club environments, being in community with other movers, you know, that feel safe for exploration. Like, I swear. Fucking around and finding out.
Yeah. I think too, it'd be cool. Like, I feel like when your husband could just have your own Burning Man upstate somewhere that is accessible to people, and like, you know, we can find some field and just like jam out.
Absolutely. Don't have to tell us twice.
And your husband does poi and fire and stuff. Like, so can you talk about like some of the other things that go on that might be inspiring to other dancers?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, just in like the festival scene, whether it's like Burning Man, or if you like going to raves, which we do. Flow arts is a big one, or formerly called, I think like it's object manipulation. But it's juggling, like, is kind of falls under that umbrella as well. But yeah, spitting fire or spinning LED props is a whole thing. It's there's different shapes of props. So some of them, you know, are rigid. I have a pair of fire fans, which I love. It's like big burlesque fans, but instead of feathers, they're wicks, and you light them on fire. Very, very fun. Poi is a big one. That's you know, traditionally a Hawaiian art form, but you know, some hippies picked it up and made it a flow at some point. But it's cool. It's really interesting to, like, you can, you know, once you get into community with flow artists, you find it's like a hyper concentrated group of movers. It's a lot of people with ADHD like myself, or like a lot of people that just like find like working with an object to be incredibly meditative. It's called flow arts for a reason. You get into a flow state with like this object or this prop. And so it's, you know, when you're on the right kind of drugs too, it's incredibly fun to watch and you know, but very, very fun to perform. It looks really, really cool to the outsider, but often the person doing it is like, you know, in like, you know, deep flow space.
It's
super cool. And it's crazy how good people get at it, like how quickly they get good at it, because it becomes addictive.
So like as a human species, like we are so much about our hands. So like when we watch someone do something with their hands, it's very captivating. So like as an audience member, it's like, oh my gosh, what are they doing with this thing? And like, how are their hands? And even when you can move your fingers in such like little ways, it's what's going on, you know? Like a lot of even magicians, they have these jazzy hands, you know? But then in a flow state, when you have something that you are manipulating in your hands and you're looking at the texture and you're just in it, like whether it's a tennis ball, whether it's a basketball, whether it's like fire, right? It's getting you into this state of flow with an object, which I think is so cool because it's different than flowing around an object. So like I found interesting contrast between the flows I do with objects and the flows that are with pole, because it's like, how do you manipulate your body around this thing, or how do you manipulate this object around you, which is like it's really interesting when you can do both, and then you like even can merge them together. There's times where I'll try to dribble around a pole, and it's easier when it's on spin than when it's on static, because static you have to really worry about what your pole hand is doing. But yeah, I do think that one, the audience gets captivated by anything with the hands, and two, the practitioner, it's just like there's so much knowledge in the hands that it can deeply get you into a flow state quick. And a lot of people nowadays are getting into what's called rope flow. And that's a practice that I learned from David Weck. I was fortunate to go to the Weck method in like 2019, like October. And rope flow is interesting too, because I can see correlations with the poi balls. If you take the rope and you use the handles as the poi balls. But also it's very much of this like figure 8 pattern that can be similar in a lot of those visual arts, or these figure 8s, these circles, but this patterning of just like getting the head over the side of the body. So making that spine nice and snaky, making those legs nice and juicy, and like the head over the foot kind of deal that David Weck preaches. But it's like, yeah, it just gets everything more like flowing as one. I know people nowadays that like use rope flow as foot rehab, because they're like, oh, it just teaches me how to connect to the ground and how that translates all the way up the spine, or like wrists or shoulders. But I think that the rope isn't the only material you need to use for that. You can make it a visual arts thing. You can bring crowd joy through that too. The thing that I did hear from Chris Chamberlain, who's David's number one under him, is like he spoke about the rope as being nice because when you're juggling, you might mess up or something, and you might mess up like 7 out of 10 times. But with the rope, when you mess up, you can continuously keep going. You just keep swinging. Like you don't have to stop, pick up the ball, or go chase the ball. So you can get into a rhythm faster, and you can get into a rhythm for longer than you are making errors, which is a different concept. But I think that like, yeah, with like poi, you could find it faster than with juggling, right? Or
I think so. Yeah. Like apparatus versus like object. Like I love this conversation because like you so rarely get to nerd out on something like this. But yeah, I mean, with objects, like absolutely. And it also, you know, just it's like, it's cool to like look at different objects and be like, okay, like what's the most enticing, like what's the most like attractive thing to watch? Like, you know, and like what are like the, you know, it's like human beings will always see like fire, like open flame, especially like in the dark, and just be like, oh, that's awesome. I want to keep looking at that. Like it's, you know, flow, like fluid spine, like full body connection, like connected movement, like doing something with the hands, but also seeing that someone's like very connected with their feet. Yes. Saying that like, you know, the core is engaged and like the head is like finishing the line of the spine. Like, like how could you like not, it's our human nature to just be like, oh, I want to watch more of that. Yes. And then taking it to like apparatuses, like being in the pole aerial world, I always find it very interesting to like know people and like know their apparatuses, like to understand their personalities, or like know them as people and be like, oh yeah, that's totally, you're a software engineer, you're like super brainy, like you have like this kind of personality type. I know you're into silks, like or you would like silks, you should try it. And like having them be like, oh my god, that was amazing. Whereas like For me, like, I am not a silks person at all. Like, I'm not in my head like that. To me, it feels like way too cerebral. And I love watching like silks people do silks. I think it's incredible. But like in my body, the act of like, you know, like tying yourself up or like, you know, getting yourself up into the silks and then like doing a drop or, you know, some other transition, it doesn't feel like juicy to me.
Yeah.
Whereas being in a lyra on a swivel and knowing that like you can just like take a seat and like plot your next move, like make some shapes, do something with your hand or your foot, or like lean back a little bit and like change the centrifugal force, you know, that to me is like so juicy. It's very, very flowable. And pole is like in the beginning, that was my frustration with pole, especially with spin pole, just like wanting to spin. But you know, the pole doesn't spin as long as like a aerial prop on a swivel. So like you got to come down sometimes, and also gravity is very much a thing,
right?
So you got to come down at some point. I love the poles at Incredible because they're so spinny, and I've gotten like literally like 3-minute long spin sequences, just like aerially, not having to come down at all.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. But I'm, you know, in 2025, one of my goals is to like make the time and the space to get on different apparati, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You know, like I would love to get into straps more, or loops. There are some incredible like people who work on loops or hammock or
the hammock.
Yeah, chains too. You know, or I think essentially loops, but just chains. But yeah, I'm interested in exploring. You know, someone who's like very much an apparatus person. Like pole is an apparatus more than an object,
right?
But I'd love to like see what, you know, something that's like more of a combo of both. You know, something that you're moving on but also around and also with. Yeah, I'm excited to explore that a bit
more. So I love the pole strap. Like, use the pole strap often,
I see you
weekly.
It on the pole strap. Yes.
One, I love it because I have a very tight, athletic, sports athlete body that is in this ready stance as opposed to this opening heart to the world stance. So yeah, and I've also biked for a very long time of my life, and so I'm able to access things in straps that I could not access without the strap. But I do find it easier to flow with. Like the other day, after doing some just easy strap work, this was on New Year's Eve, I just went up and I had like the easiest, like almost 2-minute flow with one arm in the strap, which is very taxing on the arm. So I do need to figure out how to switch it smoothly. But yeah, it's there's so much more you can access in there, and then also the time to switch between positions or really feel contact points out, and also feel safe in certain shapes that don't feel safe when you don't have that extra little like pressure or even little like help. So I think of it like a resistance band. For if someone's trying to learn a pull-up and you have a resistance band under, you have a little bit of assistance, right? If you have a strap and you're going into, I don't even know what it's called, but there's like, you're in genie but the bottom leg goes to like, you put it on your shin basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Is genie shin hold? I don't know.
Yeah, shin hold. That's what I would call it.
Yeah. So like that I really wanted to do, but it always looked so scary. So I put the strap up, I got into genie, and then I did that. And then I was like, okay, can I take some pressure off some of the strap? Like give it some slack, you know? And now I can do the shin holds. Like, so, you know, you can use them like a resistance band, or I guess any object you can use as to make something a regression. But that to me, it's nice to use for regressions in certain moves. Even my left arm has trouble with Superman, so like getting into that, like now I can do it, but yeah, for a while I was just doing Superman with the strap on my left arm. And you're still, you feel safe because you have a strong grip, you have a strong hold on the object, but you're facing the ground, you're facing possible death, like
or like
or a
smashing
terrible
your face.
injury. So
Superman is, I love teaching it because there's so many things happening. And you gotta love like something like a strap that can be a spotting tool, but also just like an enhancer, like like extra fairy dust, or something that just like makes, like you said, things, or more possibilities, more things accessible. With other side, I I don't call it bad side. I try to call it like the drunk side, because it's not bad. It's just, we're humans. We're like one side dominant most of the time, and like sometimes it changes depending on the skill. But it's like, we're never going to be like perfectly symmetrically balanced. So I think there's and not just with pole, but like, with any, or I guess most other like movement modalities, there's like there's probably a lot of like life metaphors to be found in training the other side. Like trying the other side, being brave, telling your nervous system that it's safe, doing your due diligence to make sure that you're not going to injure yourself. It's the same body, but what is safe in one side is maybe not safe in the other side, and there's so much we can learn.
And that's why I like having the opportunity to just like at least start with a regression of some sort, so that I can still build on it. There's still growth there, there's still a lot of awareness that can be put there.
Absolutely.
But if you only train one side of anything, you'll have imbalances. So even in sports, like there was one year where I broke my wrist. So my left hand, I was like shooting with my left hand all the time, dribbling with my left hand. If I'm playing these kids that I coach at the end of the like, practice or whatever, sometimes they'll be like, "Can you play with us?" And I'm like, "All right," but like I'll put my right hand behind my back and I'll play with my left hand. And then I'll still beat them by like 1 point, because they do need to know that they have to come back for class. At the same initiative, like I'm still challenging myself in a way, and it's so good for you. And I'm also showing an example of like, this is very good for you to be able to do things with both arms,
And the other side isn't gonna like look as good or perform as good maybe as the dominant side, but like that's okay. We still have to do it. It's we don't have to look or be like performing our like best all the time. Like,
right. But I mean, you think of it like, you even think of it from a transition moment. So there's so many times where you transition, if we're talking just about pole, like you transition from one move, say you're like a right arm, but you need to do a Superman right arm drop into like a left leg inside leg hang, right? So you're doing that whole, and you're like, well, but my left leg inside leg hang is not my strong side. Well, you got to go there, right? So in transitions, you don't get to choose which side you are going to often. And same thing for a sport, right? Like you might be like dribbling in some way to your right side, and then you want to do a crossover, so you better be, or in between the legs, you better be able to cross over to your weak hand, because if you don't have a strong crossover to your weak hand, most people can cross or find it that they can strongly cross over or go in between the legs or behind the back to their stronger hand, because you're catching it with your stronger hand, right? But if you can't do it the other way, then why are you starting with your right hand? So the transitions make you have to use both sides always.
Yes.
And like when it comes to using both sides, something that is a beautiful piece is going back to the rope flow or the poi flow, right? You're using both sides, and usually it's this infinity pattern that shows you how to connect both sides, because at the end of the day, you're working on how do you connect the movement through your body in a smooth way for you. Anyways. Okay, so wait, let's definitely get into your current studies, because that is some exciting news. So can you talk about that, maybe some interest going into that? And
definitely. So I am currently in a training for, I'm currently doing a certification to be a prenatal, postnatal, and birth movement coach. I'm working with a modality called the Body Ready method, which is really fascinating and deeply rooted in things like structural integration and like anatomy trains as well. So having done so much, teaching education for pole dancing and flexibility, which is really, the certifications that I did are really rooted in anatomy. It's like been such a cool, an unexpected like layering of information. I never would have thought that being a pole and flexibility teacher would like prepare me so well to be like going into this course of study and this type of movement. But it turns out like I know a lot about pelvis and like, pelvic floor function and like core function just from like getting ass overhead and teaching other people how to get their ass overhead. So my initial reasoning for wanting to go into like this kind of doula work. I've been training mostly with midwives, doulas, some physical therapists, some pelvic floor therapists, and I'm like, and I have no graduate training or anything. I'm just someone who likes to move and likes to teach movement. But it's a life stage that I don't know if I will get to experience it, but I'm in that like phase of my life where like that could be a possibility. For myself, I wanted to like know and understand exactly what was happening or exactly like what is happening with the body in that and during pregnancy and during birth, so that like if I need to or get to I can do it for myself. But also as in my years of teaching pole, I've had like a not insignificant amount of students reach out to me and say hey, I'm pregnant, is it okay if I come to class, or like what's a good level for me, or due to give birth in a couple weeks, like when's a good time for me to come back to pole, like can I do a chopper invert when I'm pregnant, or is that going to give me diastasis recti? And maybe it's just me being in my mid-30s, but I feel like there are just so many people around me who are like announcing pregnancies or or like intention for that. And so as a movement teacher, I want to be able to serve them the best that I possibly can, and as safely as I possibly can. So, and I also, as we've all, if you spend enough time doing any sort of physical modality, especially pole dancing, like we've all had experience with injuries and having to take time away from the activities that like keep you grounded and sane and creative and engaged and just like plain happy. And there's so much angst in that, largely of like, oh my God, when I come back to this thing, I'm going to lose so much, or I will have lost so much, muscle or coordination or skills or flexibility, range, whatever. And, for someone who is, a pole dancer, aerialist, any sort of mover, if I can help ease that journey and like help guide them into like serving their body the best for both themselves, their baby, and also for their craft or for their athletic art form or their thing that they do, so that the transition out and then back in is like a little bit easier or less stressful, or that they can do it with more confidence, then that would make me very happy. And it feels like a very good and like appropriate progression for my career as a movement teacher. Yeah. And then also learning about the mechanics of childbirth is just plain fascinating.
Yeah.
Bodies are so cool.
Yeah. And then they actually bounce back from such a big injury to the body. Like it really is.
Yeah.
And yeah, so when I first started personal training in like 2014, that was one of the certs that they suggested early on, was like, you might lose your clients if they're pre or postnatal and you want to keep them, so just get certified in that right away. So
nice.
But what I was taught back then is obviously not the information that's available today, and I feel like it's an ever evolving education, because we are still so fresh on our knowledge of the women's body, because we haven't studied it for years. And the reason that they didn't want to study it for years is because they didn't want to impact the woman's ability to have children. So for years and years and years, they just never studied what the effects of drugs or procedures or a lot of medical things had to do with the female body, which is really upsetting in many ways.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you're doing the work, and I have so many questions I'll be asking you, I'm sure, over this time. But yeah, I think too, I have an interesting question would be also, do you have any information that's like newer that you could share when in regards to individuals who might be trying for a child, and maybe it's IVF, maybe it's something else, to where, you know, they're either given like a period of time where they're not supposed to be working out, or they're allowed to work out. I know that also I've had clients in the past that have had just so much stress around the whole process, which is really disheartening. And also movement gives you like that stress outlet, and like if you're not doing that movement, are you getting more stress? Like, so I know that it's more on the forefront right now, and in a lot of circles that I have, I think that this would just be like wonderful to share.
Yeah. Oh my God. I have so many thoughts on this, both as someone who's studying what I'm studying, but also someone who's, you know, I've been in this journey for the past year and a half. And the way that I, you know, deal with my stress is researching. And yeah, it's to your point, the amount of like clinical research is so deeply lacking. And, you know, I'm 35 years old, and I'm considered advanced maternal age. And so like for, you know, doing IVF, like, you know, fertility doctor would be like, well, you know, okay, so, you know, time is on your side. You're not that old, but, you know, if you're like 38, you know, I would have to give you like, you know, different expectations. And like, that's so crazy. It's, because a lot of us are like, you know, you can be like just entering your prime at, you know, in your late 30s, mid 40s. Like, you know, there are like people having, you know, naturally conceiving kids in their late 40s and, you know, are perfectly fine and healthy and have like perfectly fine and healthy babies. It's, you know, it's the narratives that like the institution of medicine, like, you know, give are just, I feel like they're just, you know, like so not, they don't represent like the actual reality. And the reality is that like, yeah, it's a massive spectrum. Every body, every person, every like birthing mother, every baby is very, very different. And what I know, you know, I haven't been through it myself, but what I know from everything that I've been learning is that like every journey is just so completely different. Yeah. Like physically speaking, you know, there's a lot of things about pregnancy, like symptoms of pregnancy, that we accept as normal when they're not. They're very common. Low back pain, like pubic bone pain, pelvic floor dysfunction, trouble sleeping, trouble breathing, you know, or like filling your lungs, literally. Those are all very common, but they're not like normal. It doesn't have to be that way. Your alignment, you know, and balance in the body is everything, whether you're pregnant, trying to get pregnant or not. And it doesn't have to change as your center of gravity changes. There are, you know, many things you can do, and like very simple, you know, like basic, like stuff that like a physical therapist might give you for like, for, you know, any sort of like injury or like ailment, like also applies to like a pregnant body. You know, creating space and balance in the body, making sure that tissues are like supple and available and not like too locked up is key. There's so much you can accomplish like just with proper breathing technique. 3D breathing, which if you've ever taken Pilates or like have done a Pilates cert, you have definitely heard like 3D breathing. But the idea that you're expanding the rib cage, you know, like all like 3 dimensions.
Yeah. And that's also just quickly, like you could tie a resistance band around your rib cage and just do that and try to breathe into all of that
exactly
space. Like that's an easy feedback tool.
Totally. Yeah. And I think the single coolest thing that I've learned so far is that you can tell what's going on with the pelvic floor and the pelvic function based on what's happening in your rib cage. Because the respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic floor are the top and the bottom of like the core system. So how you're breathing like up top is also indicative of like what's happening down below. So if you have like a lot of rib thrust, then that probably means that like there's some imbalances happening like in the pelvic floor, and things can be corrected up top, you know, even with like creating more like mobility in the shoulders. Like the upper thoracic is going to have a big impact on like, you know, baby's positioning or like the positioning of like your uterus and you know, symptoms during pregnancy. It's all so interesting.
That makes sense too with like the top down as well. Yeah.
Tensegrity.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
Yeah.
For everything, you know.
Yeah. Because like the more movement you have in your thoracic, the more breath you can take in, right? The variability in breathing patterns you can have, which would also give you like it won't overuse certain breathing patterns and overuse certain muscles. So I think like variability is always key, because the overuse is when the pain comes, right? Or the annoyance comes.
Yes. Yeah. And lack of, you know, overuse and creating like lack of balance or imbalance.
Yeah.
A common thing with people who are, you know, like, okay, I'm pregnant, I want to give birth naturally. Like I really want this natural birth. And so I'm going to do like all this hip opening yoga. Hip opening yoga is often like, we think of hip opening, we think a lot of external rotation and a lot of like deep squatting. Maybe a lot of like pelvic tilt or like tuck. It's usually like kind of like one, like, it's very one-sided, where in order to like, you know, allow the pelvis to like fully function, because the pelvis is made up of a bunch of like bones that are floating in space, just like our whole skeleton. Like I think when we like think of a skeleton, we think of like a model skeleton where all the bones are like connected, but all of our bones are really floating in space, and they're just being held together by like ligament, muscle, tendon, skin, fluid. So yeah, the pelvis needs to like, you know, change position, and it's a big like multifunctional joint. So if you're only working this like deep squatting external rotation, when the time comes, you know, that's great for getting baby to come down and engage in the pelvic inlet at the top, that like big round bowl at the top of the pelvis. But you also need internal rotation and a lot of like anterior tilt to be able to work baby down through like the inlet and also through like the mid pelvis. So yeah, like that, you know, it's a myth. You're like, oh, I gotta open my hips. You gotta balance.
Yeah.
Like you have to have all of the ranges of motion available to you. Kegels is another one. When people are like, I gotta strengthen my pelvic floor, I have to do like 100 Kegels a day, or I've got to get like the little weights. You know, you want your tissues to be like supple and available, which isn't always the same thing as like strong or buff. If I wanted to, you know, have a really flexible back, I wouldn't only do like lat pull downs. Right. I would also like be working the spine in all 6 directions and doing some chest presses and like, you know, doing some like active flexibility to lengthen the tissue and find strength, like the longer ranges. Yeah.
So strength and length,
baby. Yeah. So like, you know, like banging out 100 Kegels every day, like, and doing like these massive, like, you know, contractions,
right,
is good. But like, how about some assisted squats to and inhaling at the bottom of the squat to like lengthen and tone the pelvic floor in that direction too, so that when baby is coming down, you know, it's not like super tense and tight, hypertonic. You know, you want some length in there too. You want space.
Yeah, you need space.
Yeah. So there's just a lot that's like a little bit misunderstood, and like coming from a good intention or like some understanding, the body is a holistic machine. Another one too is I've been getting really deep with the psoas muscle, which I understood, you know, in myself is this thing that's just always tight and like keeping me from being as flexible as I want to be. But it's really cool. Psoas is like like fascinating. It connects the back of the body to the front of the body. So it goes from like lower lumbar down to the inside of the femur where it reattaches. But it is literally like your nervous system's connection to the physical body, which I think is so fascinating. And for us, you know, creatures and us humans in, you know, modern day society, we spend so much time sitting and also just so much time being stressed. So that thing is like often really tight.
Yeah.
But for someone who's pregnant or birthing, like the psoas muscle is the baby's guide wire down into the pelvis. So
can you, for the listeners, can you just like explain where the psoas would be on their body?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So if you come into like a 90-90 lunge, so, you know, one leg in front of the other, and you tuck your pelvis under, so like try to squeeze your butt, tuck the tailbone under, think about connecting the hip bones to the rib bones in the front, and then try to sink your hips down. You'll start to feel like the top of the back thigh, and if you start to push your chest back, then you'll kind of feel that stretch come up into like the obliques, or like behind the obliques. There's your psoas muscle. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, you could find a big side bend. So with the same arm as the back leg, reach for the sky or the ceiling and then take it up and over. And if you're not feeling it then I don't know, maybe you don't have a psoas muscle.
No, I think that was a beautiful, thank you for also taking them through an exercise.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
Verbal cueing.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't even know where it's located, and it's also, you know, it's by a lot of other organs, it's by a lot of other tissue. And I think, so I did have someone release my psoas to an osteopath, and she released under my ribs, and then she also released my psoas in such a deep way, like, because I have Crohn's, and so there's just a lot of tension in there, and my whole body is like changed, like, and like now I know how to, I release it every day, and it's like I think it's a really important, like you said, it's a very important muscle, fascinating muscle that people don't provide enough attention to. And it can change your life if you start to have a relationship with it.
I completely agree. Yeah, and it's like, it's so deep in there, so we like can't really see it, but like working with it is profound.
Yes.
Like, I would, if anyone wants like a, you know, a really easy like movement resolution for 2025, like, I would say like just go to YouTube, like find a reputable looking YouTuber that has some psoas releases and like pick one or two.
Yeah. I think Dr. Perry from Stop Chasing Pain is a good resource for a lot of like releasing pieces, and he also does a lot with the lymphatic system, which a lot of people don't. Well, they are touching more on now, but yeah, I think he's a good resource for anyone who's listening. I would trust him.
Same. Yeah. Yes. Great recommendation.
Also, do you have any other like things that you would suggest for individuals who are going through that process?
Absolutely. So if you're, my advice from someone who's like also in that same corner trying to conceive, please do your best to not like go to Dr. Google. Like early in my journey, like my Google search history was embarrassing. I thought I was going to like break the Google servers with just how much I was Googling, like just out of fear and stress. And same thing with Reddit. Understand that the majority, first of all, there's so many subreddits about like trying to conceive, trying for a baby, like IVF, infertility problems, The vast majority of people on Reddit are not posting or commenting because they're having a good time. And if you, you know, like base your perception of reality on like what people are saying on Reddit, you're gonna think that you're going to feel like it's impossible. So, you know, no matter like if you're early, if you're, you know, if you're like early in the journey, if you're on the younger end of the spectrum, if you're on the older end of the spectrum, if you're like somewhere in the middle, being told that you're old, like, which is my situation, please know that you deserve a doctor who believes in you. Don't settle for a doctor who's like, you have this and that, and like, hey, your odds aren't good, or bother to test you. I wouldn't recommend this treatment to you. There's so many wonderful doctors out there, so many incredible like birthing people, women, healthcare providers who are, you know, making this happen against like really insane odds. You can, if anyone's like feeling down in this journey, highly recommend checking out Roseanne Austin. She is a mindset coach for people who are trying to conceive, which is like powerful. There are so many fertility coaches out there, and especially in the social media space, you can find like 10 million bajillion. There's some good like functional medicine based ones, or traditional Chinese medicine based ones who I think are doing like really great work. But like Roseanne Austin as a mindset coach, her success rate is like insane. Like where it feels like it seems like it's like too good to be true. It's magic. But mindset is, for anything having to do with the body, is like everything.
Yeah, you can change all the cells in your body
exactly
by just changing your mind.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Some people do some really crazy magic with that. They like really know how to tap in.
Yeah, it's so understudied in like for fertility and pregnancy, and also for birth. Mindset for birth is massive. But you can find a lot of clinical evidence of this in cancer patient recovery or going into like remission, like people who there are mindset studies that you can find, and it's like it's pretty profound. Like mindset really rules all. Just like for childbirth, nervous system mindset rules all. That's what makes it happen. So yeah, if anyone is feeling down on the journey, or feeling like it's like not going to happen, or that they have diagnoses, or the medical system is like shitting on them, telling them you'll never be a mother, go listen to Roseanne Austin's podcast. There are so many like real stories of real people with like less than 1% odds who do mindset work, and like it changes everything for them.
Yeah. I'm like, this is wonderful. I think a lot of people need to hear this. Because not everyone is also like coming to conversations with the struggles that they're having with this, because people aren't always wanting to talk about it, because they might feel like they are failing, or the process is failing them, or and nobody wants to be seen in that way. And also it's a very, very sensitive way for it not to be successful. Right. And I don't want to say that it's a failing piece, because I want to say like, obviously success would be the birth, but unfortunately it's just people aren't voicing their struggles. And then I very much appreciate you sharing your resources and your personal journey.
Oh my gosh, if anyone wants to reach out, I'm so very happy to like share just any knowledge that I have. If I can spare someone the angst of 10 million Google searches, like, no, here's the information that is actually going to be useful to you, or like helpful or reassuring. Well,
I do have a really happy IVF story. My friend on New Year's just said that she's pregnant with twins. So there are very happy stories.
Yes, there are. That hope
is still there for everyone listening.
Exactly.
What movements? So I've heard of like different movement plans given to different people. What movement plans would you suggest for anyone going through this process? Like, because some people are like, oh, don't move too extreme in these weeks. Like, don't stress your body out too much. But if you're a body that's already doing something very stressful like pole, like, would not moving also be a stress on your body? So those are some of the questions I have, as well as like other people that I've had conversations with. So what are your thoughts or research on moving and planning for your movements around these situations?
I think, like, listen to your body sounds like such a cliche or a platitude, but I think that's the only answer. If you are a seasoned athlete whose body is its happiest when it's doing the thing, then, stopping altogether or like, significantly reducing that is going to be a blow. It'll be stressful. It'll probably make you unhappy. I look at pole moms in the space. So like Tia Jax had a baby a few years ago, Carmine Black, Tiffany Jane, Michelle Stanek, Elijah Franklin, all were pole dancing and moving through their pregnancies, their movement didn't look alike. Like, I know Carmine and Tia were definitely like teaching online classes like up until the end. I don't think Tia was doing a lot of aerial spin pole, but it was doing a lot of heels flow and teaching incredible classes, like 8.5 months, which is just incredible. Like such a beautiful thing to see. But, others are, still doing the thing, but just like showing up and like doing what they can on a given day. So, just, I can only like go by their examples, but I feel like it's probably ideal to look up to like other athletes or other artists who are in your modality and like just kind of basing it off of like their experiences than to go by like the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and being like, well, light to moderate movement like through the middle of the second trimester. Like they don't know you, they don't know your body.
No.
They're speaking to like the like complete like total average human, which doesn't exist.
Right.
My husband read a book, and I forgot what book, but it talked about a British company that was building like fighter jets. I think for World War II probably, and so they. In order to figure out how to make the chair in the cockpit, they took an average of the heights of like pilot or the sizes of pilots and based it off of that. And then that chair that they built didn't fit anyone at all because it was based on a person who doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, that's funny.
And I think that's like always helpful to keep in mind. Like especially if you're looking for like clinical like medical recommendations. For anything. It's like, okay, this is going to be based on like the complete middle. Which is a person who doesn't exist. Yeah,
it doesn't exist because like this person may exercise 3 times a week because they are sedentary the rest of the week. This person might have a job that's very like taxing manually, so they might exercise twice a year. Like there's no one size fits all.
Exactly.
And so thank you for that. I think that will be helpful. And then also postnatal. I know a lot of individuals, because you also spoke on Kegels, but like a lot of individuals will find trouble jumping or bouncing. Or if they are given a bouncing exercise in a class, they will need to go to the bathroom very soon and then come back and finish bouncing, which, is understandable and all right. Just like, is there anything that's like helpful towards that process? Because I feel like there's a fear around bouncing because, of the control of the pelvis.
Yeah, absolutely. And then pelvic floor function too. That's been through such an event. Well, I mean, it's crazy that like after 6 weeks, you're just kind of like cleared for physical activity, like resume. And it's just like that's what does that mean? Like the athlete or the mover like really has to have good body awareness and like awareness of themselves and their limitations and how they're feeling on a given day to like to decide like what cleared for exercise means in that moment. I'm grateful for like all the postpartum folks who like share their progression on Instagram, because it's like very helpful to see. I think that's like kind of like the realist data that you can find. Other movers, what their movement history is like, what they were doing before pregnancy, during pregnancy, like up until their due date. That's helpful. I would definitely caution against like basing your own journey off of like one singular person's journey. But if you're lucky enough to be able to see a 10-week progression postpartum and how that looks on a variety of people and movers, then that is great. But yeah, as far as bouncing and pelvic floor stuff, there's so much that you can do before pregnancy. Like I think that's a nice way to like ground if you're in like the trying to conceive phase where everything is stressful and you feel like you're like just like twiddling your thumbs and thinking about it constantly. Trying to like find as much balance as possible in your body is going to be helpful during pregnancy. Again, finding balance, making sure that your glutes are working is a big one, and just creating like space and availability in all of your tissues is going to be helpful. Making sure that you're breathing properly so that you're not managing your intra-abdominal pressure correctly, not like bearing down or like bulging like in the core or like in the pelvic floor is going to be helpful. If you do have vaginal birth, like that work and that consideration will help for a smoother like entry for the baby. Or for your baby. And then, postpartum, you'll have a lot more function versus, trying to, versus the alternative, which is like having issues that maybe you don't notice during pregnancy. You maybe write them off as just like, oh, it's a pregnancy symptom. Right. I'm peeing a little bit every time I laugh, but of course, I'm carrying a baby. It's fine. But no, there's so much that can be done at any stage, like in that process. And then, there are so many wonderful pelvic floor therapists out in the world, and that's a field that really seems to be expanding and growing and becoming more and more mainstream. So, for anyone like pregnant, wanting to get pregnant or not at all, like seeing a pelvic floor therapist can be really eye-opening. Yeah. It's a whole muscle like the psoas that we don't really, it's a group of muscles. Yeah, we don't like really see or pay attention to it until it like stops functioning correctly. Right. But it can tell you a lot. And also it's really cool. It holds in like all of your organs in the pelvic bowl. It's like doing this very important job. So, and it can be very illuminating or enlightening to see what's going on there. Yeah. In the muscle group. So referrals to great pelvic floor therapists are always a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And also talk about it. Why are we not talking about the pelvis? It's a part of the body. It's always, I feel like we're bringing shame to it. And I think originally the name is rooted in shame. I don't want to butcher it, but I think it's I think Marlo Fiskin talked about it.
She would.
Yeah. But I think it is rooted in a word that means to be ashamed of or to hide away. I think that pole and those forms of dance that you've done have also helped you with knowing that this body part is important, and helping bring it to the forefront. And there's also ways to bring it to the forefront in maternity ways that it's fun. Going through that is it's a very long, stressful, tiring stage. I've never done it, but I've watched a lot of people do it. And I think if you could make it fun, if you don't have to do 100 Kegels super hard you're discussing, but even through liquid motion. Have you done liquid motion?
I've done a lot of liquid. I haven't done the certification, which is stupid. I need to do it. But yes, love liquid. I love Jenny Janover's. Yes. I love Jenny Janover in general. I think she's one of the smartest, most brilliant and empathic, best teachers ever. But her understanding of the pelvis is mind blowing. She's taught me a lot. I have to thank her for a lot.
Yeah, I think so. I was drawn to liquid motion maybe 4 months into pole, and I was not ready for it at the time. And then later, when I found I was a little bit more loose in the hips and ready to do something that was hard for me mentally, it has so much power in it.
It does.
Because as an athlete, as someone walking around in this world, you can hold tension in it because you're on the guard. Especially in New York City, you're on the guard. You're looking out for dangers, but actually drawing attention to it and leading from the pelvis in different ways is very powerful for little subtle movements or big movements like a handspring or even handstands or whatever the listeners are into. Yes, and whether I love that you're also bringing that it is important for pre and postnatal. So it's there's a lot of fun ways where you can kind of bring the pelvis in to the forefront. Yes. So if it's not pole or it's not liquid motion, there's other ways. There's hammocks, there's There's belly dancing. There's
Absolutely. There's even just like getting on hands and knees in a tabletop and tucking and untucking.
Yeah.
And I've been told that it feels incredible in pregnancy and it never feels that good again. So like if you're ever pregnant, like just get on the floor and do some like pelvic tuck and untuck.
Yeah.
And enjoy.
Nice. Is that because of the elasticity in pregnancy? Because you have a little bit more elasticity in your joints.
I think so. And also just like relieving the pressure that way, like kind of like releasing everything and letting gravity do its thing is very comforting. Yeah. But yeah, us pole dancers or, aerialists, people do Pilates, people like who do floor work, handstands, anything. We should like be very grateful that our chosen modality gives us such an acute awareness of pelvis, like tuck, untuck, or anterior tilt, posterior tilt. A lot of people who like don't have that, of like relevant movement backgrounds, like even just like teaching them to like do that motion, tucking into, or, without like getting the spine involved. So like not moving the pelvis, but like moving the spine, like that's hard. That's really hard for a lot of people. And as I've started to work with, other people like in my current like trainings, I realized that like, oh my God, even when I teach like a, beginner intermediate pole class, like they all know pelvic tuck and untuck already. Like that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's really hard. For the seniors that I used to work with, I used to use it as like the two images I gave was Donald Duck for like untuck, and the other one was scared dog, like your dog with the tail between your legs.
Yes.
And like, so yeah, that was and I think imagery usually helps with things, especially something that you weren't as comfortable doing. Maybe?
Yeah.
If you put an image to it, it doesn't seem like the thing that you're uncomfortable with. It's just like, oh, that's the thing that I'm enacting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love Donald Duck. I'm gonna steal that one.
Yeah, steal it away.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Anyway, so we have talked a while.
It's a lot of editing.
No editing. We'll just roll right through. But let's talk about where the listeners can find you.
Best place to find me is on Instagram. My username or my handle is stupid. It's probably a 10-year-old username from back when I was like, oh, Instagram's a cool like photo editing app. But it's carbs, CARB. 2 Z's, 2 underscores. So you can find me there. That's the best place. My goal for 2025 is actually to start releasing free tutorials on YouTube. So like I'll obviously be announcing those as they come on my Instagram, but soon you'll be able to learn with me on YouTube in horizontal video format.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Ooh. So we always ask this too. If you were to have one message for all the listeners, what would it be right now?
Take your time. Just take your time. There's, whether you're learning a new skill or trying to develop, your own like movement style, creating a performance piece, like maybe you are like getting ready to have a baby in some period of time, and like things, I'm so guilty of this too. Like this is as much advice for myself as for others. But yeah, sometimes or often we just feel like we have to like do all the things. We're recording this on January 2nd, and it's like a lot of people, myself included, might be feeling like, oh my God, it's 2025. Like I gotta like do all the things now. I gotta like put all the habits in place, and I have to like make all these improvements by next date. And but like flow is just key to everything in life. Like the more you push for things, I feel like it's like the more you push things away. So like take your time, let things flow, take action where you need to take action, but also know that you need to balance that action with just the act of receiving, because otherwise you won't receive.
Yeah.
Some psychedelic download there.
No, I love it. I feel like we receive so much from social media or the internet nowadays, but we don't receive enough from ourselves, or even just the practice if someone gives you a compliment It's like, how often do you sit with that compliment? Like, how long can you sit there before you get uncomfortable?
Yes.
Without complimenting them back.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my God, yes.
It's like, oh no, I'm itching. I need to give another compliment to them. Like, what can I do?
Yeah.
Sitting and receiving is just wonderful too.
Yeah. We need to condition our receiving muscles, lengthen and strengthen them.
I love that. This is beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful. This has been such a beautiful conversation. It's it's been really nice to hang out with you.
Yeah.
We've been needing to hang out, so this is great.
I feel like we could have talked about so many other things that we just didn't even touch on, but this was perfect, and I think it's really needed for a lot of people in the world. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody.